Welcome to the Sens Spotlight podcast brought to you by the Sick Podcast Network. Before we get started, bet the beauties with Betway and scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the details section to create an account and download the app. Must be 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Betway is an official sponsor of your Ottawa Senators. Also, don't forget to hit that like button, hit subscribe, and on YouTube, hit that hype button because that really helps us out as well. Pretty disappointing game again for the Senators. They outplay Utah for the vast majority of the game. Bad start, 2 goals on the first 4 shots, some bad defensive breakdowns. We'll get it all and talk about it all with Pierre McGuire once again. So, come vent with us. I think that's kind of what this podcast will be like. So hit it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Sens Spotlight.
Here's Alfredson, burst of speed, gets a shot away, score! Daniel Alfredson ends the game in overtime and sends the Ottawa Senators to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time in franchise history.
The sickest Ottawa Senators podcast. It's gonna be sick.
And we are joined by Pierre McGuire once again. Pretty difficult loss in Utah for the Senators, losing 3-1. Just what were your initial thoughts on the game?
The start was okay, but then the defensive zone coverage wasn't okay. And you know what? You want to be a leader of the team. And as you know, I'm a huge Brady Tkachuk fan. You know, I really am. But that can't happen. Like you're the team's best player. You cannot be letting guys go in zone coverage. You know, the Marino goal is Exhibit A. The Marino goal can't happen. It just cannot happen. That is your guy. I don't care if you're playing modified man-to-man, you're playing man-to-man. That is your guy. Whether you're modified or straight man-to-man, that's your man. He wasn't even close. And on the Krause goal, I don't understand. Like Jake plays on the left side. Jake goes over and identifies his guy who's on the right side of Ottawa's defensive zone coverage. And then he takes him to the net, and then he lets him go. And nobody picks him up. And he, like any NHL player, is going to score from there unmolested. Yeah. So they get, and I know Travis is putting a positive spin on it, and he has to. He has to. They're going into Colorado tonight, the best team in the league by a mile, not by a little bit, by a mile. That's a brutal back-to-back. And then they come home and play against a rested Florida Panthers team who won't have played a game since after tonight when they play Montreal. So, this is tough. We said it about 2 weeks ago, you and I. We talked about how there was a 4-game stretch, and they had to get a lot of points out of that 4, and they did it. They kept alive. Well, now they're at the same juncture, and here we are almost to the middle of January. And if they don't have this thing sorted out by the end of next Tuesday when they play Vancouver at home before they go in to play the Rangers on Wednesday, it's over. And then you're going to have – unless they sort it out, which they could, but if they don't, it's over, and they're going to have to start moving some bodies out.
I think that game in Vancouver, if they don't win 2 of their next 3 games, like tonight, I think tonight is going to be really might be a litmus test for where this team's at. Do they fight? Do they claw out a point? Maybe even win, which would be you would feel would be, it's hard to explain momentum in hockey, right? Because it's there sometimes. It's there sometimes as well. But I find with this team right now, they need to find ways to get points. Last night, they should have got at least a point. They haven't done it.
Milka was good. You got to give the goalie credit where credit's due. He made some really good saves, and so I give him a lot of credit. And they had a lot of odd man opportunities, and I know they hit some, posts. Sure. Whether it's 2 or 3, I don't know. They hit enough posts. But the truth is, they still lost the game. And that was the first game back after a road trip for Utah. That's their first home game with the next 6 after last night being at home. We talked about it in our last show. I said, these guys are going home thinking they're going to win a lot of games at home. So you better be ready after their win with the Rangers at MSG the other night before they got home. And you could see last night, especially I would say to start, they were ready. Utah, they were on their toes. And again, you can't, if you're going to win on the road in any building, you got to be on your toes to start the game. Ottawa wasn't on their toes.
No. I find this team when their best stretch of hockey was without Brady Tkachuk, and I'm not making that. I'm not saying that this team is better without Brady Tkachuk than with, but they played a lot of really tight, boring hockey. And right now, this team is actually playing a lot of exciting hockey. I think in a lot of ways, this team's in a place where it's gonna be hard for them to get out of it without finding ways to get points, right? And I, I think that they haven't that stretch where they, what was it, 11 out of 12 or 10 out of 11 games, I think it was in November, where they secured points. It was boring hockey. It was tight checking. There wasn't much out there. There wasn't a lot of space. And right now, the Senators, I find, are actually carrying a lot of the play a lot of the time, but it's too high wire. There's too much back and forth, right? And they haven't really played that style of hockey really since Tkachuk's come back, at least in large spurts. And I don't know how you change it, how you get back to that, but I think this team needs to really focus on being a better defensive team, and that will lead to everything else.
I think today's a pretty easy film session if they're going to even do that. And you don't have to do it with the whole team. There's certain guys that need to be addressed. And so everybody's got their own coaching style. Brady needs to understand that he's part of the team. He's not an individual when it comes to in zone coverage. Jake has been really good the whole year. He had a couple bad reads last night, but he still played a good game. Don't get me wrong. But Timmy looks like he's still playing great, but he looks like he's starting to freelance a little bit because he's getting frustrated. They're going to have to, and I loved what you said, Alex, because I think it's true. They need to reel them in. This is not going to be a high wire team. And if they try to be, they're going to be doing it out of the playoffs. They won't be in. So they got to get back to structure, discipline, team first kind of hockey. And if they don't, it's not going to be a very positive second half of the year.
I will say, the goaltending's been what we've talked about just, on numerous occasions on the show. I thought Marilina actually had a really good game. He made a bunch of big saves, a couple breakaway saves in the second period specifically. And obviously that third goal, I have no clue how that's not goalie interference, because we just saw a goal by Shane Pinto against Washington where he jams at the goalie's pad, puck goes in, and they overturn it. And they say it's goalie interference. I'm like, just be consistent. I don't understand this rule. Like I tweeted it, but it's like, just make it make sense. Like if it's obvious, right? For me, like there's a great story by Down Goes Brown or Sean McIndoe for The Athletic about goalie interference and kind of outlining why it should be obvious, right? And for me, it's twofold. Do you interact with the goaltender, and if you're not pushed in and the goaltender's in the crease, it is goaltender interference. If you get pushed in and you hit the goaltender, then it is not goalie interference, right? If you shove the puck or if you shove your stick into a goalie's pad, that's goaltender interference because he can't make the save. To me, like, it's not that hard. And I have no clue. I'm just lost for words. And on that play, Thomas Chabot gets high sticked and is bleeding, and it should have been a 4-minute power play. So it's just
we talked about this as well a few weeks ago. The truth is that the NHL officials are doing a great job in terms of training people to be ready to referee at the NHL level. The problem is we've had a lot of guys retire that were really good, and we've had a lot of guys that are really good that have been hurt. And because of that, it's just like players. They're Russian guys. Like if I were to say to you, and I'll just say it, who wears number 7 as an official in the NHL? You would have no idea. You have no idea. I'll tell you, Garrett Rank. But I do this for a living. Like, you're not supposed to know who the referee is. But the problem is if you did it on a basis where you're watching, like tonight there's 12 games in a league. I defy you to watch all 12 games, which more times than not I do, and tell me who the 2 officials are without reading their names on the screen, because you're not going to know. So we're rushing guys into the league, and it's unfortunate. It's not their fault because we've had so many retired guys and so many injured guys. It's a problem. I'm telling you, it's a problem. And the game's way too fast. Way too fast.
For sure. And there's a couple of dubious calls last night, but for me, it's just the goal interference. Like, you have some guy, or, maybe it's a woman, I don't know, in Toronto overseeing this, like, just make the same call. It's very frustrating to me because I look at it and I have no clue what the outcome is. And that it's not that sometimes it's hard, but for me, there's so many times where I'm like, oh, that's goal interference, right? And the goal against Detroit, I think was it Greg interfered? I'm like, yeah, that's goal interference. They called it right. Props to them.
Yeah.
But it's rare that I feel
that's when he jammed the net and it was a shot from about
Yeah.
17 or 20 feet. Yeah, I remember that.
But
that was goal interference for sure.
It was goal interference, but that was like one of the 2 times this year, and it feels like the Senators have either been scored on or scored via like kind of a dubious goal interference kind of question mark, and maybe twice I've like, oh, I clearly think it's this, and then that's the outcome, right? So it wasn't the reason they lost, but I do think it really impacted the game because Pinto had that breakaway chance just moments before.
Right.
They were right there, and you could see Utah really carried the play of the third period, and I think Ottawa's legs after a long road trip, you could kind of feel it in that third period, unfortunately. Yeah. And I really liked their second period. Didn't get anything of it. Hit a lot of posts. Like, they're playing pretty well. I thought their structure was really good the first two. Well, the second period I thought was their best period for sure.
It was their best.
Yeah. So, but I think with this, what did you think of Green just shuffling up the lines and putting Cousins on the wing, Pinto at the two, like that line with Tkachuk, Pinto and Zetterlund did not.
Yeah, he's looking for answers because he's trying to dig deep to get something going. And I get it. I mean, coaches are always trying to stimulate the game. I think I've told you this before. Between 10 and 20 points a year, a coach has to affect the outcome of a game with an in-game decision, whether it's pulling the goalie, whether it's changing a line, whether it's sitting a guy down, whether it's making a strategic adjustment. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but just think about what the margins are. If you have a coach that doesn't make a difference in double digits, 10 to 20 points over the course of 82 games, I'm telling you right now, your team's not going to make the playoffs. And you compound that with all the injuries. Like Ottawa's had some injury stuff to deal with, especially with Brady and with Shane. That's a problem. And Tommy too, Shabbat. So, and now without Swayman, no disrespect to the other guys. I like both of them, Marilainen and Sogard. I had a chance to work with both kids when I was working there, so I like both kids a lot. But they're unproven NHL players. And that's not on Marilainen, by the way, last night.
No.
He did his job. He did what he was supposed to do. That's not on him at all. How do you like the Cousins goal, not the Cousins goal, excuse me, the Krause goal?
Krause goal.
There's like, come on. They're not, and the Marino goal, no, there's like nobody stopping those shots. So that's 2 right there, and then the goalie interference thing, like this madhouse scramble down low. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You and I think it's no goal and goalie interference, and their fans are saying that's a great goal, and the referees agree with them. So, like, that's a hard play for the goalie. It is. Yeah. But I just think that now, I hate to be morbid, but now more than ever, this is getting serious now. It's getting really serious.
It's like you look at Buffalo and their winning streak. Every loss that compiles, the longer the Sens Buffalo-esque winning streak has to be to get back into a playoff spot.
Yeah, no.
Right? Like now instead of them needing to go on a 5-game winning streak, they need to go on a 7-8-game winning streak. And those are really hard to do in the game in the NHL when there's so much parity that it's
this is an unfriendly schedule too. And I know every team is going through it. I get it. But this one is cuckoo. Like you played Detroit the other night, then you go out to the Mountain Time Zone, then you go down to Colorado, who's rested, number one, after coming off a loss in Tampa the other night. Then you're coming all the way back to play Florida that doesn't play tomorrow. They play tonight in Montreal. Like you just look at it, they're in the same time zone. This is a brutal run here. And then you play Vancouver, and then you go right to New York and play.
Yeah.
And then you come back and you play Montreal on Saturday night. So this little stretch here, this will dictate whether you're going to be really talking about playoff hockey or you're going to be talking about the trade deadline. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah. What do you do if you're 7 points out at the deadline if you're Steve Stais?
7 is legit manageable. If you're double digits, nah.
I mean,
you never identify. I think you would agree. Logan Hessler was a disappointment at the World Junior, and he was probably considered one of their top prospects. So it doesn't mean that he's done. Please, I've seen kids go and struggle and then all of a sudden bounce right back. How many people, thought that Trevor Zegras was going to be a guy that was going to turn around in Philadelphia this year after the way he played? No. Nobody did. And that was an established NHL player. So guys can turn it around. Like, don't never write them off. But you've got also, prior preparation prevents potential problems. You got to say, well, maybe he's not the A+ prospect we thought. Maybe he's more of a B. And so now you got to adjust. And so that's the art of team building. And the biggest key to all this, and this is for fans, and I know how passionate they are in Ottawa, you can't be blindly loyal to guys that you overrate internally.
No.
A lot of teams in the league, and I think it's more because guys are so petrified of the media. I really believe this. They're so petrified of the media that run teams that they overrate their prospects and they sell them, and the media buys it because they trust these guys.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't work out, and then you got a problem. You got a big problem.
And I think, there's a handful of trades that I can recall where I'm like, they traded the top prospect and it really hurt them. I think of the Suzuki Pacioretty trade, right? It was supposed to be Brandstrom in Ottawa. Obviously, that did not pan out, right? Like, there's way more guys that just never pan out and not even or become like an okay NHLer versus like what you wanted them to be.
Yeah.
So for me, I think with this window, the thing is that, if they're 7 points out of a playoff spot, you should not be trading a top prospect to win now. That unless it's like you're getting a guy with a couple of years of control, but you're not doing it for a rental or anything like that.
Let me ask you a question, Alex. Do you have your computer in front of you?
I do.
Okay. Can you tell me off the top of your head who Lawson Krause was traded for from the Florida Panthers to the Arizona Coyotes?
Oh, I know. I remember this
I'm
trade.
backing your point up because this was a trade of a first-round pick, a kid that was a really good junior player for Kingston in the Ontario Hockey League. He gets traded by Florida to Arizona. He's an alternate captain. That's my point. No, so there's a trade that happened. Florida had a really good player. He was a young guy. They said, we're going for it now. We're all in now. Jonathan Huberdeau, I'll use that as an example. Jonathan Huberdeau was coming off a 100+ point season in Florida. He gets traded to Calgary. Calgary thinks they're getting Mackenzie Weegar and Jonathan Huberdeau for Matthew Tkachuk. Jonathan Huberdeau hasn't been close.
No.
Hadn't been close. Uyghur's a really good player, and I know he's an Ottawa guy, and I know there's tons of his family and friends probably watching. But neither one of them is Matthew Tkachuk.
No.
So teams do this a lot.
Yeah, I think right now the problem is, and I wrote about this a couple days ago for SportsCenter. It's like you don't have picks because you don't have your first rounder this year. I think there's still a world where they might get there, but I will say if the pick turns out to be like 12th, like Gary Bettman, come on, this is not your ruin. Anyways,
you know what's interesting though? I see it. So I always believe that first rounders, whether they're in the top 5 or the last 5, they're always going to be somebody that's going to find a way to be on your team. Look at this year with Ben Kindle. Ben Kindle in Pittsburgh was the 11th pick overall. 11th. He's playing on the Penguins' first power play, and he's their third-line center. And at the start of the year, he's actually playing a lot with Sidney Crosby on the left wing, with Brian Rust when Rickard Raquel got hurt. So that's just one example. So you can always find players. So it's a multi-pronged thing that we're talking about here because obviously the game is lost last night. There was a lot of good. There was some bad. There was some terrible in-zone coverage. So how do you fix it going forward if you're Ottawa? Because the margins are getting to the point where you got to decide. We either are a playoff team or not a playoff team. And what are you going to do if you're not a playoff team? The general manager said it the other day. I'm paraphrasing, and I believe it was to your question, and I thought it was a really good question. Yeah. We'll decide when we're ready to compete, or something along those lines.
I would say, I was just looking at it. They have $23 million in cap space next year.
Do you think? Okay, so I'm going to ask you this: you really think they're going to spend to the cap? No, they're not. So that's another one. This is inside baseball for the fans out there. there are a lot of owners, not a couple. I'm telling you, there are a lot of owners that say, yeah, the cap might be going up. We're not spending to it.
Yep.
And I'm just taking the inside. There's 17 teams right now, as of this morning, that are not spending close to the cap. Right now, 17, more than half the league. That's now.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't write the article. Somebody did about Toronto's empty seats.
Yeah.
They're not I watch all the games. They're not the only one with empty seats. Trust me when I tell you. There are a lot of empty seats, far more than people know.
You know, like the projections, this is like very inside baseball stuff or inside hockey stuff, but people talk about the cap rising. And, you know, I don't profess to be an economist or anything like that, by no means. But to me, to think that it's all going to be sunshine and, you know, rainbows and everything's going to go up and up and up with, you know, you don't need to be a political analyst. We don't need to get there. But like, I'm not saying the world seems like it's going really well right now. Right. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how they feel like the cap's just going to keep rising and rising and rising. At the same time, for the Senators right now, they have, 23 million in cap space. Basically, outside of Claude Giroux and holes on your right side of the defense, you have everyone locked in and a goalie. So even if you spend 15 of the, you know, or 14 of the allotted cap space, right? You're still...
That's probably three good players.
That's probably three good players,
yeah,
right?
Three good players if you want. But you have to make that decision. You have to want to do it.
And I wonder if they trade a guy, if I think if the season's lost, let's say at the deadline they're 8 points out, 7 points out, and it's like, okay, they need kind of they need what St. Louis did last year, right? What was it, like 18-2-2 or whatever? That you trade X player that is a good player but isn't a, you know, changing your fortunes. Get some assets back, get some picks because you need some, or get a young player, something like that. And say, hey, in the offseason, this is when we're going to do a major tinker, right? I wonder if we're getting to that stage. And I actually think if you feel like the tipping point of like making the playoffs is like 25% or lower or 30% or lower at the deadline, I think you like soft rebuild or retool or whatever the right word is, right? Because you don't have enough in your cupboard.
Yeah, no, all great points and well said. So here's one of the things I would say or caution. They have to get a real good read on their marketplace because usually getting in the playoffs means better season ticket renewals, usually. And I would say in Ottawa's marketplace, that's very true.
Yep.
So I'd be willing to bet the fact they made the playoffs last year helped their season ticket base significantly. Yeah, I'll bet you money on it. And I don't know the numbers, but that's what it was. So now this is for the fans. Some markets, you just got to get to the first round and you're at least a break-even entity, if not a profitable entity. Most markets, again, outside of the original six are different. You can't gauge them compared to everybody else. They're just different. But most markets, if you don't get at least to the second round, you are not a profitable entity. You are not. And so one of the things that I look at a lot is I look at TV numbers. And you look at prime different events that happen over the course of the year. So this year you had the Winter Classic in Florida. Unique. Very well done by the Florida Panthers, by the way. Very well done by the league. The TV number was so underwhelming, it's scary. It was less than 1 million viewers. And that was not going against college football. They set it up so they didn't have to go against college football and NFL. That's why they didn't do it on the first, which they usually do. They did it on the second. They had less than 1 million viewers. With the New York marketplace, underwhelming team, and a Florida team that's back-to-back Stanley Cup champs and been to the final 3 years in a row. And it was a unique event. They had less than 1 million viewers. Like, I'm just telling you, that's very scary. And they can try to poo-poo it all they want. They got another one coming up in Tampa. where the Boston Bruins are going to be playing the Tampa Bay Lightning, and it's going to be, quote unquote, this engineering marvel. I'm not sure fans are buying that right now. And so the TV networks, I'll just say this to you. If Toronto and Vancouver both miss the playoffs this year, I don't even want to see what the TV number is going to be in Canada. And I know
if Montreal makes it, that is a huge boost.
It's a gigantic thing. Yeah. But how about Toronto and Vancouver missing?
Yeah. Well, Toronto, of course, is, a beast. And I do always enjoy their playoff misery. I won't lie. A lot of Schadenfreude, a lot of
yeah. You understand what I'm saying? This all goes to, we're talking about this because of the fact that you're talking about all the cap room. And what I'm trying to caution people about, and I've been doing this probably since last June, when there was big talk about the cap going up, and I'm like, I got a lot of friends that are executives in this league, and I kind of know that there were some cash calls, and then you do more of a deep dive, and you start looking at how many teams are spending below the cap right now. And as I said to you, as of this morning, they're 17.
And also you look at regional rights, and that's a mess.
Half the people that bought regional rights went bankrupt.
Yeah. So that's not going well. So I think, if you're the Senators, you maybe want the cap not to keep going up and up and up. Obviously, that means the league is struggling to some degree in some capacity. But yeah, I don't think the Sens are going to be spending to the cap next year, especially because it balloons up again, right? Because we have had these two huge jumps up to, like, what is it, 105, 103?
Well, the killer too, because you're there. And this is one of the reasons I love doing the show with you, because you're a realist. The Canadian dollar is not exactly blowing it out of the water.
No.
So, I know you hedge, and I know all the Canadian teams hedge, and they buy their currency in the summer, they buy it in the spring, and I understand that. But it's a really expensive entity to do currency exchange. Like, it's massive.
Yeah.
Just think about when you go on vacation, wherever you go in the world, whether you're buying British sterling or the euro or whatever, US dollars. I mean,
yeah. And also, like, the U.S. economy is not doing great. We're in this interesting pinpoint. And I mean, again, we're not economists, and that's not kind of why we're here. But I do think the landscape of the NHL, and for that matter, specific to the Senators, is going to be really interesting in the next couple of years. And I do think that for the most part, it's going to be there's going to be a lot of conundrums for the Senators. And if they don't spend, or if it looks like they're being cheap, and I'm not, I don't know if I want to say I don't blame an owner, because if they are a billionaire, it's like they have enough money, but they don't want to spend it. But, it's not my money, and I'm not going to begrudge it. But, you were there. You know how fans felt about the Melnyk era, right? Where he didn't spend at all to the cap. I don't think we're at that stage at all, right? There are, I think, 4 million cap this year. But we're going to get into a stage where, hey, this seems it could feel similar to what the Senators fans just went through. And if the team isn't winning, if the team is winning, you can, the criticism goes away a little bit easier and quietly. If the team's losing and you're not spending, that's, I think, where fans get pretty irate. And rightfully
said. Go ahead, finish.
No, and I just think rightfully so. Like, if you feel like this team's made the playoff once in the last 8 years, if they miss out again, it'll be 8 of 9 or whatever the case may be. And then you're saying, oh, well, we're not going to spend because we don't have enough money, right? It's like, well, I've been a freaking fan for 10 freaking years, and I want to, it's not like the Sens, you look at the roster and say, oh, they can't compete, right? They need some, obviously, some improvements in some key areas, but they're not that far away from being a playoff.
No, they're not far away. And there's going to be expansion coming, so there's going to be some different things happening with expansion drafts and people wanting to move. That's why I think we talked about this. The college free agency market is going to be the next big growth market. It's going to be a huge growth market. Look at Stephen Halliday. There's he's a really good player.
What do you think of putting him in the top 6?
I don't know about the top 6 right now, but I definitely have him playing more minutes. I think there's a lot of things he can do. And I think he's slowly, in a good way, earning the coach's trust, the coaching staff's trust. That's really important. So, no, I see a lot of – I'll use it comparable. Oliver Kapanen's a really important player for Montreal right now. At the start of the year, they wanted to send him to Laval, but they couldn't because they had so many injuries. So he stays in Montreal, eventually hooks up and has this unbelievable chemistry with Demidov and Slavkovsky, and that line's just ripping it up right now, and he's totally destroying it. And I'm not saying Halliday's as good a player. They're different. Halliday's more of a power player. Kapanen's more of a brain player with high-level skill. But Halliday's a player that's an NHL player. Yeah. And so that's like found money for you. And I think they got to start exploring that avenue. And they can't make it personal when they go. Like, there's some scouts like some coaches, they like some programs, and they don't like other coaches, and they don't like other. You can't worry about that stuff now.
No.
You just got to go get the best player. Here's I want to look positive for Ottawa. The fact they're talking about LeBreton Flats in a positive way is really good. That's number one. I really think it is. Number two, there's a lot of local money that's in the ownership group with Michael Andlauer. I think that's really good because those people have unbelievable passion for the team to do well. So I think that's really good. I loved your point before, and I want to make this more of a positive than negative. I thought before you made an amazing point, Alex, about all their best players, they're locked up. They don't have to worry about these crazy negotiations that maybe when I was working there, we had to worry about, whether it was Drake or Josh or Brady. There were, trust me, there were some big moguls to get through with some of those. But no, that's stability for the franchise. So we identify, what do we need to be better at? We need to be better on the right side. We need to have maybe one more top six scoring forward, probably a winger. We need to have better penalty kill. Like, there's certain things you can identify. There's not a laundry list 20 miles long. It's maybe 5 feet long. Yeah. So you're not that far.
Yeah, exactly. I guess from you, like, maybe on the scouting, like, you look at Yakimchuk, you look at Hensler, like, those guys don't seem to have been hitting. And what would you do, if you're Steve Staios with the scouting staff? Sorry, I'm going to sneeze.
Well, for me to answer that question, first of all, I like all the guys that are on their staff, whether it's Donnie Boyd or Steve Sterling or Todd Sterling. I know all those guys. I was really good friends with Trent Mann. I thought Trent did really good work.
Yeah.
So I get it. Staffs go over changes, and that's part of the business. But the one thing I'd say is, and I don't know how much they talk about it, Dave Poulin should be really plugged into this because that's his backyard. He was very successful at Notre Dame as a hockey person, both as a player and a coach, and then eventually an administrator. They got to do a really good job hitting it out of the park on the college players. I'm telling you, it's going to be the next big growth. And if you don't identify that as a staff, I think you're doing. I personally, if I were involved with a team, I would set up a department, probably 2, maybe 3 people deep. And their only job would be free agents in the college market. I mean, that's it. Yeah. Because you could hit home runs. I'll give you an example. Justin Ritzkovian just signed a 2-year deal with Dallas. He's a kid that was never drafted out of Northeastern University. He's from the West Island of Montreal. He's playing unbelievable hockey for them. They just signed him to less than $1 million a year in a 2-year deal. I think it's $975 a year. Free money. That's a free player. Yeah. He as good as everybody thinks Ridley Gregg is, who was a first-round pick. This guy's as good or better. And there are a plethora. I'm telling you, because I watch so many games. I'm on the Hobey Baker nomination committee and for the best player in college hockey. And I'm just telling you, if you watch enough games, you'll be like, that guy hasn't been drafted? How'd that guy get so good? This guy hasn't been drafted. Like, there are so many of them. And I really believe that a lot of teams, if they don't pay attention to that, they're doomed.
I do think, like, with, it's weird. I find, like, and I don't know if you've been in the hockey world, you've seen reactions and how people think about, like, management and drafting over time, right? Is the Pierre Dorion era, like, there was a lot of, like, they hit it out of the park with Tkachuk, Sanderson, Stützle. That 2020 draft was unmatched. And then, there's other draft picks like the Boucher one, Ben Roger, et cetera, right? And so I think, you at a certain point, you're like, oh, they were drafting really well, but it was like they hit it out of the park mostly with their first round picks. Drake Batherson, Pinto, some later guys as well. And then you look at Staios, his first year, his first full year, he makes all these trades to get, Jensen. He signs Amadio, Perron, who I've actually liked those signings for the most part. They make the playoffs. We trust this guy. He's the best thing since sliced bread. And then this year, it's like, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? And it's typically always in the middle kind of the decision-making process. But I think we're getting to a point now where we're thinking, okay, what's Steve's like? We're looking back and saying, okay, there's a couple bad decisions here or ones that aren't working out, and you need to somehow rectify them, right? And at the same time, you can also say, like, give it time, right? He said that too, right? Beginning of the year, Fabian Zetterlund was not scoring. Now, I still think he's a flawed player, but he's on pace for 20 goals. Like, that's basically what he's being paid to do, right?
That's his role. Right? Yes, I agree.
So things can change within 3-week stretches, right? But
there's no quick fix in the league, though, because guys still need development time, and that's the biggest thing. Is that everybody thinks, oh, yeah, you can go do this, you can go do that. You can. It's not as easy. I'm not going to say the player's name, but I was at the Board of Governors meeting when I worked in Ottawa, and the general manager of that team comes up to me after one of the first meetings. It was a budget meeting for the Board of Governors. And he said, hey, this guy's, somebody you guys could really use. So I looked at the GM and I'm like, you're telling me what our team could use? I would never, ever be as arrogant as to tell you who you need. And he wanted to trade Ottawa a player for 2 first-round picks. And I called up, ownership, and I called up the people that I worked with, and I was like, just so you know, they're going to call you on this. And if you're asking me my suggestion, I would say don't do it. And we didn't do it. But when people are sensing that there is a level of urgency and they think your team needs to really do something, whether it's ownership pressure, fan base pressure, media pressure, you have no friends in this league. Everybody pretends to be your friend. They're no friends. And you got to have a stiff backbone, and you got to be able to say no. Like, it takes a lot of audacity to come up to another team and say, oh, by the way, I got the thing that's going to fix your team. I own it. I'm going to give it to you, but I'm going to give it to you at this price. Like, that takes a lot of audacity. And if you don't have the chutzpah to stand up to those people,
yeah,
you're not going to be successful.
And to, the moniker that Staios has got has been Steady Steve, right? Very calculated, and I think, for the most part, I like that, as you were mentioning it there, it's like, don't just do a rash trade. Don't just, go all in just to go all in because you're feeling pressure. I think that's the right approach. At the same time, there is this barrier where it's like when, steadiness or not doing becomes like poor action by inaction, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what will be really interesting to see with Staios is how he manages this time where, do you not make moves that maybe you should make, but you don't want to seem rash, or you don't want to slightly overpay, and you don't want to be taken advantage of, like that story you're kind of talking about. But that might be actually the wrong decision because you do need to win right now, right? Or you do the opposite and you make that rash move and it doesn't work out, and now you're even, in a worse position, right? And I think, the most interesting thing to get in the psyche of a GM is seeing almost like the pamphlet of all the different machinations, all the trades, all the potential signings that you could do, and picking them or deciding to kind of hold out or wait. I find that always really interesting because it's like it can almost go in like 12 different directions. And the trade that almost happened, that didn't happen, but kind of worked out, right? All those different things. Or the trade that you probably shouldn't have done, then you do it, and then obviously it doesn't work out. Or it does, right?
Yeah.
But
biggest question for Ottawa is, what's your organizational strength? I'm talking about on the ice now. And what's your organizational weakness? So the key is don't overrate players, because a lot of times you fall in love with your own draft picks. Once you do that, you're in trouble. And then the other part is make sure you're very honest about what your organizational weaknesses are. And if you do that, you can sit down internally and brainstorm and say, okay, we're not good enough on the right side of our defense. Give me a list of 10 guys that are right shot defensemen that are playing well in the league that we think we have a realistic chance to trade for. Just do that. It's real simple. That part of it's easy, I'm telling you. So it doesn't mean you're going to be able to get the players, but you have to do the exercise.
Yeah.
It's like I say this story all the time. Craig Patrick was an amazing team builder. He wasn't good. He was amazing because he wasn't afraid to trade elite players to address an organizational weakness. Think about it for 1 second. Paul Coffey and Mark Recchi are in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He traded Paul Coffey and Mark Recchi to the Philadelphia Flyers, Pittsburgh's biggest rival, and nasty as all get out, trust me, very mean, for Rick Tocchet, Shel Samuelson, and Ken Reagan. Those players are not going in the Hall of Fame. They were the perfect tonic for our team. Tocchet was big, physical, mean. He could play in your top six. He can play in your bottom six. He was never going to complain. He was highly coachable. Shel Samuelson wasn't going to play every night in your top four. He knew it, but he was going to be very useful for you, and he was an elite penalty killer. And Kenny Reagan was the perfect backup for Tommy Barrasso because Kenny wouldn't say boo if he had his mouth full. He just wouldn't. He's an amazing man. He's still living. He's an amazing man. So Craig does this deal. And everybody in the hockey world was shocked and like, oh, Pittsburgh's not going to be able to defend their cup. They just took a step backwards. We're the only team in NHL history to win 11 straight games to win the Stanley Cup. None of the experts ever thought we would do anything. But we did the exercise I just told you. What are our organizational strengths? What are our organizational weaknesses? And how can we fix them? How can we fix them?
And you know what I think you're referencing with this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, where the Senators are really deep? Down the middle.
Yes, sir.
And that is the area of strength, and you can trade from that area of strength to address an area of need, right?
That is correct, sir.
And I think that's where this is. I think if Staios is going to make this team better, that is how you do it. Because as much as I like certain players, and I'm not going to throw them out, at a certain point, it's better to have a top four defenseman than a way too talented fourth line center, right? Or even a third line center, you could argue, right? And so they're going to be at this conundrum point, and I don't know what they're going to do. I have no insight. I'm not trying to, I'm not breaking trades or anything like that, but I do think that's where we're headed, where it's going to be a hockey trade to some degree, and it's the Senators are going to have to trade a center to impact the rest of the roster. And maybe that's a top six forward. That seems kind of a bit almost mute. Yeah. Like it doesn't make as much.
Pinto and Stützle are untouchable, so they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, you think Pinto's untouchable?
I wouldn't trade Shane Pinto. You can't find those guys. They're really hard to find because it's not just a shutdown capability and the penalty kill and the second, probably more times than not, second power play. But he's hard. Those guys are hard to find. The Boston Bruins, without Bergeron, without Krejci, they're not the same. They're not even close to the same team.
No. You
lose Sakic. You can go down the history of the NHL. Sakic, Forsberg, Lemieux, Francis, Gretzky, Messier. You just Kopitar, Richards. Go look at all the teams that have won over time. Look at Florida the last 2 years. Barkov, Bennett, Lundell, Nosek. They got four.
Yeah.
They got four. That's how you win. I remember Neil Broughton and Joe Nieuwendyk in Dallas.
Yeah.
So you can't. You got to make sure you got. I call it double trouble. Crosby, Malkin. If you don't have double trouble down the middle, you're in trouble. You got to have two of them.
And I think Pinto hasn't looked himself yet just after coming back from injury. But I do think it's indicative that they put Cousins on the wing, right, with Stützle. I think that kind of says something about, he's a really good player, but he has way more points on the power play than at 5-on-5, right? Dylan Cousins. And I think that's a guy to kind of look at I think he's still a really good player, and I wouldn't just trade him just to trade him. Like, I think he's definitely a good NHL player and good in your top 6. But if you can trade that for a top 4 right shot D, I would do it. I think that's kind of where you're at right now.
Yeah. So we're on the same. We're on the same.
Yeah. But Pierre, thanks so much for having. This was like almost a State of the Union. It wasn't really about the game.
You know what? It's perfect because it's a middle part of the season. It's kind of a therapy session after last night's loss going into Colorado. And tomorrow, I can't wait to talk to you about. Okay, we got to win in Colorado. Let's go, baby.
I will say, if they win tonight in Colorado, that podcast tomorrow will be we're just going to be on cloud 9, because I think that'll feel like, whoa.
That's kind of what I'm hoping for. Stranger things have happened. Think about the Leafs the other night, okay? They have injuries. They got guys banged up. They got guys that aren't going to play. They got all kinds of bad news. They found a way to win.
Yep. And it feels like this team is not finding ways to win, but hopefully they can turn that around and beat the best team maybe ever in the regular season.
It's unbelievable what Colorado's doing. I'll give you a quick story of hope. I'm coaching Hartford, and we're about to play the New York Rangers in 1994 in Hartford on a Saturday night, and that's a big game for both teams because we're still in the playoff hunt. And we're having our morning skate at Avon Old Farms, the rink that Brian Leach helped create, as a prep school player. And I'm so mad. Our team's practicing like poo, like we're bad. So I called him to the middle. I said, clearly you guys don't really want to be here. And when I watch it like that, I don't want to be here either. So let's just go home right now. And I'll ask you only one thing. Be ready from 7 to 10. Game starts at 7. Hopefully it's over by 10. We beat the New York Rangers that night, and we beat them pretty comfortably. And what I remember the most is the players – I got their attention because they were mad that I booted them off the ice because they weren't used to that. And so I made them uncomfortable. Yeah. And I'm not saying they have to make their team uncomfortable going into the game tonight, but they have to make sure that they're ready to start with their foot on the accelerator. The thing that I'll give you an example from last night's hockey. The Montreal Canadiens could have rolled over and said, you know what, we did a great job in Dallas the other night. We're coming home after a trip. We're going to sit back and just coast through this thing. They were pedal to the metal from the start, and they planted such a seed of doubt in the minds of the Calgary Flames. Calgary could never reel the game in. No chance. They had no chance. That's what Ottawa has to do tonight. Pedal to the metal and plant the seed of doubt early in Colorado's mind.
Yep, exactly. So hopefully they can do that, pedal to the metal in the Mile High Club. So we'll see what happens. But thanks, Pierre, so much for doing this. A little bit of a therapy session. As a therapist, I always enjoy that. So right up my alley. But hopefully this is like the last one we do all year. But who knows? Anyways, we have the right people to talk about this team right now. So it should be a fun episode tomorrow as well. And thanks to everyone for listening. And thanks, Pierre, for coming on.
Always for you, Alex. Always. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Sens Spotlight on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.